Hey, good day, all. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast. It's Thursday, July 8th. If you're a regular on the live stream and you're like, hey, where's our daily podcast? We're coming to you a little bit late today for all kinds of very good reasons. But producer Dan and Doug Pagitt here with you. I'm in Minneapolis. Dan outside of South Bend, Indiana. Oh, Dan,
That's right.
how's your 4th of July week, my friend?
It was great. Spent the week up at the lake, so a little lake called Jensen Lake in northern Michigan, and just swam a lot. It was oppressively hot, so you just had to be in the water, and
There you go.
it was great.
Excellent. I mean, this is one of those weeks, that people set aside, big vacation weeks for people. We're going to talk a little bit about the news today and common good news. And I was shocked by this headline. We'll show some of them on the screen. I don't have a slide for this one, but over the 4th of July weekend, from Friday to Sunday, there were more than 400 shootings across the United States, and 150 people were killed in those shootings. And there's just something, I guess, at any time of the year, it's not so much that, oh boy, that there was a series of shootings that ruined the 4th of July, but there is a violence epidemic that is running through this country. You see it in all kinds of crime. Crime is up in so many places, and people are wondering what that's about, like where that's coming from. A lot of people are suspecting, and I think this is likely true, just from how I view the world. I think the pandemic has created a lot of issues, and some of it, like the cultural situation, is difficult for people. The economic situation is difficult for people, and it just sort of feels like we're in a kind of a, hey, stuff didn't really work is a period. I think that the way our politics are going, it's sort of an eroding to the system and structure between COVID and the political virus of Trumpism and all this. I really blame it all on that. I am surprised that more people haven't blamed the last 4 years of the Trump administration for the rise in crime over the last year. I'm just surprised that hasn't happened. I think it likely deserves it. Did you see that video by chance of the man in a Walgreens in San Francisco just stealing stuff? And
No.
a security guard. So there's a man, he's got his bike in the store. He has a big garbage bag, and he's putting things in the garbage bag, just taking them off the shelves. He's wearing a COVID-like mask and a hat. And we have joked on this podcast that, this is how bank robbers used to dress. And in a lot of states, it was illegal to wear a face covering for this very purpose. So the guy's pretty much, indistinguishable.
Yeah.
And the store manager is recording with her phone. There's a security guard recording with his phone. And they're just like, what do we do? The guy's just casually going through, loading up stuff in his bag and riding off with it. I mean, there is a kind of, and that's like in San Francisco,
Wow. And the store manager's like, I'm not going to physically, attack this guy to stop him from stealing from Walgreens. Like,
yeah, I'm not putting my life on the line or getting physically harmed if it would come to that. I'm just going to stand back here and do what I can. But that feels like a shift in our society. I remember when we have 4 children, and especially our boys talked about this stuff. They were like 6 or 7, 8 years old. We were at this little pharmacy that was also kind of a drugstore, like it sold candy and stuff. I don't even know if they have those anymore. There's none around my house. They've all been taken over by the CVS's and the Walgreens. Like your little, did you have one of these growing up? Like a little local?
Yeah. 5 and dime. Like, yeah.
Yeah. The guy owning it turned out was the pharmacist, and he ran like his pharmacy business and then wrapped a whole little store around it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like now as an adult, I'm like, okay, I think I know what was going on up there at Kramer's, Kramer's Pharmacy, that Bill Kramer was, trying to run this thing. And we would, this kind of place where you learn to shoplift the penny ante stuff. You'd steal a little dumb sucker or something as a kid. Well, our kids
Life
were in
lessons.
there. Yeah, just learning the ways of the world. Yeah, just adulting at a young age. And I remember my kids, boys especially, saying one time we left the store, and I'm not sure if they took something on this particular day. Pretty sure they did, and we would have sent them back in to return it, as we did, the times when we found out they did. but it kind of was dawning on them. And I heard them saying in the back of the car, the back of the van, to me and to each other, there's no one around to stop us from stealing this stuff. Like we could, they're realizing
Yeah.
the old Bill Kramer, whoever it was at that place, is back behind the pharmacy, and the checkout person is up in the front, and all that open space in between. And that's when we talked about, hey, look, the world is not set up to prevent you from doing bad things. The world assumes that you have the power to do bad things. You can steal, you can lie, you can hurt, you can harm.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, you can get away with most of it. It's set up to tell a story to you that you shouldn't do that there's a better way,
Right.
that your morals should drive. But it's not prevention, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
everything's not locked up. The important stuff was locked up, and the dangerous stuff was locked up. The magazines you're not supposed to look at as a kid, and then cigarettes, and now in some stores they lock up the more expensive things. But yeah, it's we're all operating under a social agreement that you're just
Right.
not going to put stuff in your pocket, and there'll be signs up that'll warn you or something. It feels like some of that has just sort of gone away, and this rise in shootings and more violent activities just feels like a general sense that, wow, there's a bit of lawlessness afoot. And as I'm wont to do, I think we should apply the reasons for that to the right places. And I think
Yeah.
when you have the lawlessness that we had at our largest civic level, which is the Trump administration for 4 years, watching the criminality of that crowd, the number of people, as we mentioned, that have gone to jail and all the rest of it, that have been connected with that, and just the constancy of
Yeah.
investigations of criminal behavior. I don't know. I think it's created something afoot. There's something afoot. And
Yeah. And I think there's two approaches when crime goes up. You can either increase police presence and crime prevention, or you can look at root causes and try to get to what's behind these rises in crime around the country. And I think that's it's easy to just pump more money to the police department and say, fix this, stop the
yeah,
crime, But I feel like we have to dig deeper and get to the underlying issues. Why are people desperate? Why are people stealing? Like, maybe people need more money in their pockets to buy food. Like, what are the
yeah,
systems keeping people in poverty and keeping people
yeah.
desperate?
That's right, and that would be an interesting analysis, because in the last year, we've given people a lot of money, right? Like a lot of us
Mm-hmm.
have received checks from the government. It's been more support than ever. These things are afoot, and yet this crime is happening. So maybe it's not enough. Fair argument. Maybe that's not all that drives it. Maybe there are people that can't access that, and that creates another level of disparity.
Right.
But what's certainly not the option is you can't put a cop in every store. You're not going to put a security person in. I mean, I've been to countries where it feels that way. Like I've been in Guatemala, and when you're in the city of Guatemala City, man, I'm telling you, there is not a store that doesn't have an armed person in it,
Yeah.
and they are crime prevention at the highest sort of level. Now, it's a totally crime-ridden situation, so it tells me that doesn't work, right? It
Mm-hmm.
at some point it just kind of escalates and
Yeah.
runs over the top of itself. And I also think that there's something ironic, and we need to be straight about this. We talked about this in the podcast yesterday on the Faith Day with Laura and Stephanie and Dominique, that the 4th of July is the story of this country in a violent revolution against its government to throw off its shackles and become a free nation,
Mm-hmm.
born out of a deadly violent revolution. So yeah, that's rooted in our society, and we
Yeah.
tend to see ourselves as law-abiding and freedom-giving and caring, and all the stories we tell of ourselves, of which are true. But we're also a country of this other thing. And when lawlessness versus criminality. So I've ever done my little lawlessness versus criminality routine.
No, I haven't heard
I,
heard this
I've been
bit.
I've been working on this. I've been working on this. Some of it sort of popped up because I watched the 4th season of Fargo, and in the 4th season of the TV show Fargo on FX, worth a cable subscription or just buying that little their $10 a month app access to it if you haven't watched it. The 4th season of Fargo, it's set in the 1950s, and they make a comparison. One of the people involved in it is accused by a family friend, a younger girl in the family, says, "How come you're criminals to this particular woman?" And she says, "Oh, sweetie, we're not criminals. We're outlaws." And she says, "Well, what's the difference?" And the woman says, "Criminals say, I recognize that I'm under the authority of the law and I'm breaking it. Outlaws, we're not under the authority of the law. We do what we want." And that idea just was like it connected these pieces for me about how some people approach the law. That some people are like, "Look, I'm trying to get around the laws." Other people are like, "I don't care what they are.
Mm-hmm.
We're just sort of coming over, it's a version of, I don't know, I guess social anarchy or something, right? Like, no, we don't care. We're outlaws around here." And this becomes the basis of the story, right? And as the TV show Fargo is, it is a dark allegory about what's wrong with the human condition, right? So it's not praising any of that. It's trying to highlight. And this is why I think that what's happening at the Trump level was so devastating, because I think that crowd operated as a bunch of outlaws. They just did not respect, care, or feel that they were under the authority of any of it. They just ran over it from top to bottom and said, "This, we will bend the system to our advantage, irrespective of what it means to anybody else."
Yeah, the system we've championed forever, we will roll it over if it means getting our way. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I just think it's really the now, again, you can't put every single social ill on this, but I think it's part of setting the context, right? And there are times where people need to get all sort of outlaw-ish.
Yeah, I was going
Right?
to say, because so many social movements are built on these laws are unjust, we need to deliberately disobey these laws to show that they
Yes.
are immoral.
Yes, and it's a hard thing inside of protest movements. Some of us that are in the nonviolent protest movements, when you get arrested, as I have on a number of occasions for a social cause, you're fundamentally saying, "I am going to do something that crosses over an agreed upon legal standard, and I will take the consequence of that."
Mm-hmm.
In other words, in this analogy, or in this taxonomy, it's a criminal act, right? I broke the law.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to, I'm going to try to do this in a way that is irrespective of the law. The man who went into that I saw in this video seemed in San Francisco, that's just loading it up and doesn't care. He's acting. I mean, it seems to me like that is a classic issue of lawlessness. Just like, I don't, how you doing over there? Don't really care. I'm not going to stop. I mean, I'm not
dare
even
you to stop me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not about shame, like, oh, he should feel guilty. It's just about, he doesn't even care to acknowledge that it's it's the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere social change happens, I don't know, between like acknowledging the laws and then adjusting them, breaking them. This is why Martin Luther King Jr. is in jail. This is why Jesus is arrested. Like, these are the narratives you have. But then you have times where you're like, no, we just need to actually declare that this law has no moral authority at all. And that's a difficult thing for us to recognize as a society, because we don't want to live in a society that's lawless. I feel like we can live in a society that has criminality and we know how to deal with it. We just deal with it poorly in this country, extremely poorly, dangerously poorly. But you can't live in a lawless society.
Mm-hmm.
Right there was some of this push happening, when the former failed president would say things like, that he would say about lawlessness, and people are like, well, go to Somalia and look at what lawlessness looks like, or what's soon to become Afghanistan, right? Where there's just like, it's not based on any rule of law, any agreements, any civic institutions. It's just sheer power and authority that's granted to the people that take it, and that's a kind of world that we just can't handle. So somewhere these crime waves, when they reach a new level of danger and lawlessness, is what we sort of have to think about and be concerned with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, and on that note, Rudy Giuliani has had his law license suspended
Speaking of
by
laws.
by the
I was going to go to
by
Afghanistan, but you
Washington,
want to
D.C.
go to Rudy.
I can't get these jokers out of my head. So Rudy Giuliani had his law license suspended by the state of New York. Lawyers, Dan, I didn't know this until I was talking to a lawyer about if she wanted to move during COVID. And she said, yeah, I know I'm in Illinois. I was thinking about moving, to Florida or something, but I don't want to have to retake the bar. And I said, like, you have to retake the bar exam when you move? She said, oh, yeah, every lawyer is licensed in that state and can only practice law in that state.
Right.
This was a little shocking. And it's hard for people to keep up on the bar and get multiple bar license because the laws are different. You have to go through all this training. And even though a lawyer, like anybody else in a profession, gets really good at your profession, you're totally capable of doing it. To have to go take that test again, that's a higher standard to get in. It's like if you lose your driver's license and have to go take the road test or the written test, you'd be like, I don't know how many feet I'm supposed to turn on my blinker before I come to an intersection. Is it 500? Is it 1,200? I don't know. I'd have to bone up on the rules. I sort of know how to drive and can do that in the flow of traffic, but I don't know what the rules are about all this stuff. So she was concerned about that. And that's when I learned, I didn't know that lawyers couldn't practice. I thought maybe it was like, well, you'd have to hook up with a law firm there, or you'd have to get connected to a client base. And it's a much, much bigger deal than that. So apparently Rudy Giuliani had law licenses in both the state of New York and in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. And so when the New York State 2 weeks ago suspended his law license for saying demonstrably false statements in legal proceedings, lawlessness, just sheer lawlessness, right? Does not care. Just and the one group of people who don't allow their members to be lawless is lawyers.
It's in the name.
It's in the name. It's in the name. It's like having a vegetarian for your butcher. You just you probably don't go to that butcher shop when the person's like, yeah, no, I'm vegetarian leaning vegan. That's probably not the place you want. You don't want your lawyer being lawless. And these guys are just so lawless that they have suspended his license in New York, and then Washington, D.C. followed up. So here, Rudy Giuliani now is really in jeopardy of losing his ability to sell himself as an esquire, as a man who can charge lawyerly rates, which will cause
the question,
Rudy Giuliani.
Who wants to hire Rudy Giuliani at this point? Like, who is paying him to do anything for them?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, apparently that. What was the lawn service that he did
Total landscape, Four Seasons
total landscaping. That's a shout back when Trump was trying to talk about the election not going in his favor because it was rigged. They did a big press conference and it was supposed to be at the Four Seasons, and someone booked it at the Four Seasons landscaping and lawn services.
One of the most amazing political moments of all time.
Yeah. And then they doubled down on it and said, no, we're here with the working people. I mean, just incredible.
Try
these
to
guys.
spin it. Yeah. This was intentional the whole time.
The whole time. Yeah. I mean, that's, what do you think? We're going to go to like the Four Seasons hotel? Oh, why would we ever? How could we ever? So it's, there's just I get it. There's a crowd of incompetence in all this around some of these people. And it's not only on one political side. Also in the news this week is that Michael Avenatti, famous from way back in the Mueller days, way back in the Stormy Daniels had an affair with Donald Trump, was paid $175,000 to cover it up. That became an illegal contribution to his campaign. Michael is Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, went to prison and was convicted because of that and other activities. That Michael Avenatti, the one that represented Stormy Daniels, lawless, fellow, maybe just a run of the mill criminal, hard to tell. Apparently, he had multiple charges set out against him that were going to come down. And so here's somebody very anti-Trump, at least legally, and
At least on those days, yeah.
was trying to bribe Nike or trying to blackmail the company Nike and saying, I have some salacious material that I will release about Nike and hurt you in public relations ways if you don't basically hire me and pay me $25 million. And he got caught for it. And has been sentenced now to jail for trying to extort a company. And extortion and these kinds of things, this is lawlessness, right? This is just again, when lawyers are doing this and doing this kind of extortion, it really breaks the social fabric. As weak and broken as the social fabric might be, as unfair and unjust as it is, it just reaches a level where you can't have these people doing these things. And so we've been sort of joking the whole time that Trump's election just cobbled together the most fringy parts of American society. Certainly Americans, certainly part of us. Nobody that I know, people shouldn't want to cut them out or ignore them or say that they're not important or they're not part of all this. But good golly, these people probably shouldn't be the lawyers of fame and the attention grabbing people that they are. Hey, one more thing on Trump before we finally let this poor guy go for the day from our minds. He has Secret Service support, because we want to make sure that our former presidents, no matter how failed they are not hurt and harmed. And there's a lot of things that could go wrong in America if this person was kidnapped or executed or something terrible. So we put Secret Service around him to protect him. Well, because Donald Trump lives in his resort, the Secret Service need to be around him, and he's charging them nearly $10,000 in the month of May for the rooms that they're staying in. And so the guy has figured out how to bilk the federal government yet again and seemingly in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. Until ultimately he loses control of his company and all of these are foreclosed on and he doesn't own any of these places, which is likely what could happen from the tax fraud that's going forward. But he's just finding a way to double dip. He's charging them, the people that we pay to protect our former presidents, then are paying hotel rates to him to protect him. And again, if most people, even if you're in that situation, would just say, that all seems rather unseemly, right? That just seems like that's not a smart move. Let's not do that. Let's find another way. Most people would just, because you're in the public eye, you would care about that.
Yeah.
He doesn't care and just basically says, I'm smart because I can bilk you. Yeah. And you're not. You're just petty and cheap, and it's ridiculous. Fortunately, the federal government has enough money, right? As we are reminded by our economists, the federal government's not begging you for dollars because they need it. The federal government creates its budgets and fills it with its own money and uses taxes to regulate the economy. So it's not just about that. It's just bad form, man. It's just and it's just bad for the American story that we're trying to all create here together.
Yeah, and even if it's technically legal, it's still like, is that what we want to be like as public figures? But it seems like there's a group of people that are like, yeah, get yours, and if you're smart enough, you'll get yours, and screw everybody else. That's winning in America. And that's
right.
That's something that people celebrated about Trump, was he's a tough guy and gets what he wants or whatever. It's
that's right.
Is that really what? Is that what we teach our kids? We don't.
Yeah.
We don't want our kids to do that.
Yeah, and we don't want to cheer on anybody that's on the other side of an idea, a political expression, than us to do it. Like when you're really living in some sort of hypocritical moment, when the thing that you're okay with your side of an issue doing, and you would totally be outraged when the other side does it, that's when you're saying like, oh, okay, maybe this is just us bending it our
Hmm.
way and bending it our direction. Hey, Jane Elizabeth is saying that that my statement about lawyers having to get a law license in each state is not entirely true. That states offer reciprocity between their states. So she's saying that Florida is not one of those, but other places have it. So apparently, in some places, you can partner with some other states to do law in that area. So I don't know how that plays. We should get a lawyer on and find out if there's something important about what it means to have a law license in different states. So clearly, Rudy Giuliani had some sort of law license in Washington D.C. And maybe the story is, oh, the law license that they've canceled the reciprocity deal with him because of what's happening in over there in in New York. So thank you, Jane Elizabeth, for correcting us on that one. That's we appreciate that a lot. Anytime someone does it. All right. So can we breathe deep and sort of let these people go and just use as a transition the fact that QAnon, the big idea behind all this nonsense, has a new plan for how they're going to be powerful, and that is they're going to have their people run for school board.
Oh man.
QAnon is the jambalaya of it's the stew of all the conspiracy nutterism. So you just throw all the conspiracy theories you can think of, from space lasers into 9/11 conspiracies, into deep statism, into Trump is calling out Democrats who exist as a political party simply to harm and exploit children. All of this, throw that into one big pot, and that's what's called QAnon. QAnon started much more specifically, but it's become the shopping mall of
All
nutter,
encompassing. Yeah, it's the
nutter
Walmart of
butterism.
conspiracies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have a one of those stores here in the Twin Cities area that's also across like Wisconsin and maybe a little bit into Michigan. It's called Menards.
Oh
Do you have a
yeah.
Menards? Oh,
Oh,
you have
love
Menards in your?
Menards.
Okay.
Save big
Okay.
money at
You save big
Menards.
money at Menards, and they always have this 11% rebate dealio. And when I talk to people from other parts of the country, I start describing Menards, where I've shopped regularly for the last couple of days, including yesterday for a birthday party that I had here at my house for adults, mind you. And I bought 3 boxes of the Nutty Bars, those chocolate covered peanut
Good choice. Yeah.
things. Man, those things are lovely. Okay, but Menards is one of these stores that it's like a Home Depot or a Lowe's. So it has a lumber yard. It has a full garden shop. It's a giant sort of home improvement superstore.
But you can
And then
also do your
everything else you
grocery
could,
shopping. Yeah.
and the most random things in that store, and laid out in a way that there might be an aisle of dog toy or a little basket of dog toys right in the section when you're walking by the lighted lampposts and the small garden cherubums that you might want to pick up
Cherubums.
as you're making your way over to the long escalator that takes you up to the lighting section.
Uh,
That's then also going to be over by the Tupperware, and it is just an experience unto itself. And you go into a Menards, and the thing I love about it is no one working there acts as if this place makes any sense. So you start asking them like, "Hey, and they're like, "Oh man, okay, I don't know. We gotta go look." It's just like you're
you
mushroom
walk a
hunting.
quarter mile in that direction
Yeah,
when you see the Christmas
it's the
trees hang a left.
greatest. I don't mean this in any disparaging way against Larry Menard, the founder of Menards, or Menard shoppers that are saving big money. But that's kind of QAnon in the conspiracy theory world. Just all the pieces really lodged together in there. Um,
Anything you
you
could
know,
want. Yeah.
yeah, as Jim is saying, the QAnon people will go everything from school shootings are fake, so all the Jones, that guy, that conspiracy theorist, just across the board, they just throw it all together. Well, now they're thinking they're going to run for school board. So if you're not a super voter, I mean, if you're not like so deeply tied into the civic life of your community, you're probably not thinking a lot about who's running for school board. I'll just be blunt. I have never had an opinion about a school board member other than a friend who was running for school board. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
you get my vote for sure. Like when I get to that ballot and I look at that random list of names back
And
there,
I see the
of which
one
I'm
list of name I know.
where it's like vote for four and there's three names on there, I'm going to make sure I mark yours first. Right. That's how it works in our place. Like the school board races here where I live don't tend to be highly um, contended for. In some places right around me, it's a lot of power, and it really is the stair stepping up to other political engagements. So people use it as a real starter kit. Clearly, that's what
Mm.
QAnon is doing. They're like, let's get our Qers. Let's get what they call themselves. But so this is like deep conspiracy theory people, and a lot of these people are on the national level. Marjorie Taylor Greene is sort of taken on the champion level of all of this, and there's lots of them, enough to run for school board all over the country. So maybe just for the next decade, you're going to have to pay a little more attention to your school board meetings and the people running, and start asking them if they believe in these conspiracy theories. And we'll do a whole segment sometime on QAnon and how you can recognize um, deep conspiracy theories. I'll just give you this one little hint, one little clue to sort of finding your way. It's a bit like if you're gonna go into the Joann fabric and have to pick up some burlap because you need to cover a side of your garage, and you don't want people to see it, so you need to get 14 feet of 48-inch burlap to run across. I know that's a very specific analogy that maybe someone had to experience 3 days ago before a party. If you're unfamiliar with the Joann fabric, and you're not big into sewing, those stores can be a little confusing. Dan, have you ever spent time in a Joann fabric?
I have indeed, yeah.
No.
It's no Menards, but they have a lot of
It's
stuff.
but if you don't know your way around the fabrics, it's hard to know. But once you kind of figure out the pattern, pun intended, of how the fabrics are laid out in there, you can sort of find your way over to the burlap. And then, of course, you have to make sure you've downloaded the Joann Fabric app
You
so
got
that
to
you
get
can
the
get
coupons, yeah.
your coupons. Yeah, it's a real coupon heavy, sort of place. All that to say, once you sort of can recognize a few things, it makes the store more manageable. One of the ways to manage the QAnon world is when you hear someone say things like, "I do my own research." The phrase "I do my own research," that is classic catchphrase inside the conspiracy theory worlds.
Yep.
Right? This is the thing people say. Now, they're typically not doing their own research to the sense that you're suggesting that someone's doing their own research, right? Like not to be snooty about it, but the point being, they're not hiring researchers, they're not running a test, they're not running a double-blind theory they're not running a theory through a double-blind scientific test and doing their own research. What they mean is, I'm reading these websites, I'm watching these videos, I'm downloading this PDF, as opposed to the ones that you read and that you look at. They're not deep into their own research.
Right.
Right. They're just saying, no, I'm not taking the information given to me by other sources. I am putting together my own set of sources. That's one of the clues that you're talking to somebody who's probably dealing somewhere, somehow inside of a conspiracy theory. And this is tough because you kind of want people to have their own drive, right? Like it's nothing that's a very good thing for people to say, "Hey, I took this seriously and I started looking up more things and I looked around the internet and found my own set of data and information." That's a really good thing. But when someone's rationale for doing their own research means, I don't listen to people who have a whole system set up to investigate data and information, aka the normal standard media.
Mm-hmm.
And when that's why they say, "Oh, I don't listen to CNN, I don't listen to the New York Times, I don't listen to the Wall Street Journal, I don't listen to the Washington Post, I don't listen to the LA Times, I don't read the Minneapolis Star Tribune." That's not where I'm getting my information. I do my own research. meaning that stuff is all suspect. This is one of the telltale signs that someone's about to tell you something that doesn't meet with the information that comes from those other places and those other
Mm-hmm.
sources. And again, they'll often raise, and they should, the tobacco industry and say, well, look at all the people who are pitching the tobacco industry, and we all knew there was something wayward going on there, and it's a problem. So yeah, there are times where the truth is found out by breaking through the system. But the
Mm-hmm.
people who cracked the tobacco industry weren't a bunch of people just reading random stuff on the internet, right? It was actually people who were
Investigative
digging around,
reporters, yeah.
investigating and getting legal record. Like the very thing that you say you don't want to listen to is what was used to create the thing that now you're
Right.
saying you should just go do your own research. This is all part of it. So
Yeah.
if you're interviewing a school board member, and you've now gotten yourself in that deep, and you hear the phrase, well, yeah, I know this is what everyone's saying, but I do my own research. Latch on to that phrase and follow that thread with the person and find out from where that comes. Because what they're likely going to say is they're going to name a YouTuber or a podcast or a video or a PDF that just simply comes from the name of someone you don't know and recognize, as opposed to the ones that you do know and
Yeah.
recognize.
And look, we should all be verifying our news sources and triangulating our news. If you read something crazy on the internet and it sounds a little too crazy to be true, see what other news sources are saying about it. Are they covering it? Are they not?
Right.
We should all be a little more wary of the memes we read as news and double check that stuff. So
Yeah, and it's tough because you don't know who's in on it, right? You could say like, well, my lawyer told me this was true, but your lawyer was Rudy Giuliani. And so the fact that Rudy Giuliani was your lawyer, maybe there's not someone you listen to unless he's giving you hair dye suggestions. Right, but so
or
it's tough.
venue
It's
ideas.
yeah, it's tough. There's a lot going on, but QAnon is a real danger. Hey, our good
sure.
friends over there at the public religious studies world, Robbie Jones and all, have a new story out that Christians are not diminishing as fast as they used to in America. That the decline of white Christian plurality has stopped shrinking. So, okay. So a number of people do this work. No one does it better than Robbie Jones and the crowd over there. I will just say, and we should have Robbie on sometime to talk about this, that part of what goes on in religion is identification. Self-identification is a really important part of how we organize people's religious understanding and ideas. And we've tended to use brand name denominations or brand name categories like evangelical or Pentecostal or Methodist or Presbyterian or Catholic or Eastern Orthodox inside the Christian world. In Islam and in Judaism and in Hinduism and Sikhism, they use other categories to organize. But in the largest religious group in the country, Christianity, we use these brand name groups. And there's a lot of people who have stopped associating their identity with one of those brand name groups.
Right.
This has been the biggest shift and change in religion in America in the last 50 years. It's seen more shift in this issue for more people with more impact than anything else. People just simply say, I don't identify in any of those groups, with any of those clubs. Some people say that because they've quit religion and religion no longer has an impact in their life, and Christianity as a narrative and as a story is they've eliminated it, right? So they've said, I'm now done. I used to be a Southern Baptist. I used to be a Presbyterian. Now I'm not. I'm out. That's it. Call me non-affiliated. Call me a none. When you ask me on a survey, what religious category are you in? I am zip, zero, nothing. I don't have one because I'm out of religion 100%. There's other people for whom they are saying, I don't associate as a Methodist or as an Orthodox or as a Catholic anymore at all. I don't do that one bit because my faith is more personal to me and it drives me more deeply and it means more than anything. So I cobble together my own group of resources that I'm using and utilizing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're asked in a poll, what religious group are you in? And you either pick other or none, you get thrown into the nuns. Now, again, we should talk to the researchers because they say that they know how to they know how to separate this business out from those who've quit religion altogether. I don't think their polling is just bad on this. That's not my argument here. My argument is the person you're talking to doesn't know how to categorize this. I talk to these people all the time. I've pastored a church full of them. I had a bunch of them in my backyard for a party last night. If you had done a poll of all the people that came over and were in my yard and were part of this church that I was pastor of for all these years, they would all be like, no, I'm not really in a religious category, you know. But on other ways, you'd totally say like, no, these are those evangelical type people, right? Like
Yeah.
one person did a karaoke song of a Mercy Me song as a sort of fun play on something, right? And everybody got the joke, right? Like, you know, in this kind of karaoke thing, you don't do a praise and worship song. That's hilarious. But there's still part now. They would all say, like, I don't really think about Christianity the way I used to. But in political purposes or civic purposes, that is not the same thing as people who are saying, I'm just out of religion and religion has no power any longer. So a lot of this business about we went from 80% of people who identified as Christian down to 50%, and now it's at 44% of people who are white who identify as Christian. To believe then that there's like only, you know, half those people, there's only half the people for whom Christianity would have a powerful narrative for them than there was a number of years ago. I don't think that's the right read on it at all. I think I'm not being very clear about this, but I think there's something else going on.
And then you factor in the nominal Christians who say they're Christians, but never go to church, never do the, quote, Christian things. And they were a large part of, I saw one, maybe it was the Pew study that came out recently, but the less you went to church, the more likely you were to identify with Trump and the insurrectionists. Like, you'd be more positive about insurrection the less you went to church. And I found that fascinating. So the more you go to church, the less radical your beliefs are. But it's the like, yeah, I'm a Christian, a God and country, you know, in name only Christian.
Yes.
Let's storm the Capitol, you know.
Let's storm the Capitol. Yeah, and that's what these two the people that have dislocated from a religious tradition, of which I would now have to sort of count myself, right? Like I used to be a pastor. I'm not really going to a church right now. like I don't know how this all functions, right? If you then use some category like, well, let me use your behavior in the last 18 months to determine if you're Christian or not. Have you attended a Bible study? Have you attended a church service? Are you a member somewhere? Do you give your time, energy, and money into a local congregation? All those things would be no.
Same,
I'm as Christian now as I've ever been, right?
Right.
Yeah, like 2 years ago, I was a leader of one of those places, right? Now so like, what's the category that you get to all this? Now, some of those people have found great freedom and life and love, right? Like, yeah, God is love. I'm in the family of love. I live in the story of Jesus and love, and I'm rooted in that story. And so I'm more in Christianity now than probably I've ever been in that purest sense. Other people are like, no, I have no construct authority around me whatsoever. The only thing I care about is my group winning. I'm going to baptize that in Christianity, and we're going to attack the Capitol. The nuns, the non-affiliateds, the not reallys, the nominals, the whatever that is, the groups that we're part of, our little groups has a real problem because about half of those people are dangerous. And I don't mean dangerous in a theological sense. I mean dangerous in like they have attacked people and the roots of this country and continue to brag about it. When we were with those Proud Boys down in Florida back in October and sitting in a bar arguing about who's more Christian, right? Them or us with the Proud Boys, that was a moment of awakening, right? Like, being told by a man who tells me I'm armed with a weapon, shouting and screaming violent things at our rally. And then we're in this conversation, a setup conversation in a bar, having an intentional conversation with a group of them. And they're telling me that I'm the heretic. Yeah. Oh, you be the person traveling the country asking Christians to care about faith, hope, and love is the one that's the heretic, and you, on the other hand, are not. Th- and that's going on all over the place, man. It is just happening all over.
Yeah.
And one of the signs, in fundamentalism, and there's a non-affiliated religious Christian movement that's really fundamentalist, that they can't find any church that's good enough, pure enough, or right enough for them. So that's
Mm,
why they don't go, as opposed to the people that are like, I think all of you are a bunch of wackadoodles, and I've given up on that Christian story a long time ago, and I am out. Like, you guys are in the, you're in the QAnon superstore. So I've quit this because I
mm-hmm.
want to be out with the sane people. All those people get put in the same category of the now newly disassociated or non-affiliated, right? So that's
Yeah.
part of what took the 87% down to the 50% or 45% or whatever the polling has. And I think this is a really rich, deep conversation that those of us who care about this and are involved in these worlds have to have. And there's probably more people that are in that non-associated cluster that come from the same backgrounds as people who would be in the evangelical and charismatic Pentecostal category. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think there's just tens of millions, 50s of millions of
Yeah.
these people, or 50 million of these people that are in the country. It's what's growing is people's realization that, oh no, I don't have one group that I'm part of. I don't do
Right.
group identity about any of this. And the same problems that you're going to have inside of religion, you're going to have inside of the loosely affiliated religious movements
Right.
in this country. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have to figure out a way to self-identify better, or figure out a way to come up with some sort of helpful terminology around this. But I think you and the faith leaders yesterday pointed out that everyone is the hero of their own story. When the Proud Boys, they're the heroes of their narrative. They are the true patriots and the true Christians. And I think that's some common ground that you can attempt to utilize to say, well, if you really love this country, like, seems like this isn't the way to do it. Let's have a conversation about that.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah. Okay, that takes us to Afghanistan. There's a hard turn. Maybe there's a connection here. In Afghanistan, the United States has decided finally, after all these years, to pull out our military presence. Um, a perhaps a disastrous choice. I'm starting to think there were better ways for us to remove our military presence and to leave a significant United States presence. But the Biden administration, as was the situation with the Trump administration and a little bit of the Obama administration, and actually hints of it way back in the Bush administration, wanted to figure out a way to not get caught up in the quagmire that was Afghanistan,
Mm-hmm.
particularly the uniqueness of the creation of the country of Afghanistan after World War II and after World War I was a disaster. It overlaid a national boundary over ethnic and tribal groups that happened all across the Middle East. It's proven to be wrong-headed from start to finish and continues to harm people's lives today, right?
Yeah.
So this is just some larger narrative about what's going on in Afghanistan. And many of the same social, religious issues that we just talked about and that are alive and well here are happening in Afghanistan. Can it have institutions that can run a government? Can it live in a way that is not lawless? The act of violence and gun violence that's being perpetrated in towns and villages. There's an uprise of religious leaders that are not tied to any tradition and people that are pushing back against it. All the same categories, all the same conversation we've been talking about today, alive and well in Afghanistan, but in a
Mm-hmm.
different context with a different level of implication. And I thought this article in The Guardian was interesting, where it says that armed Afghan women take to the streets in a show of defiance against the Taliban. Now, women in north and central regions of the country stage demonstrations as militants make sweeping gains nationwide. I mean, the Taliban has just said all along, we're just going to wait this out. And
Gonna
back
wait
when
it out. Yeah.
the Bush administration, the Obama administration said, well, we're not getting rid of the Taliban. When I realized in whatever it was, 2004, 2005, that what we were doing in Iraq and what we were doing in Afghanistan was even worse than, even more wrong-headed than any of us could have imagined, was when it became clear that the Taliban, who supported the militants and the terrorists that came to the United States and planned and executed the attacks on September 11th, that safe harboring group that Bush had said there will be no safe harbor for anybody anywhere, and we're talking to you, Pakistan, and you're going to give these people up, and you're either for us or against us, all that. It was the Taliban that was the head of that whole thing, right? That's who Osama bin Laden had to deal with. They ran the whole thing. When the United States said, no, we're going to let the Taliban stay in place. We have no desire to annihilate, eliminate the Taliban. They're just going to become part of the ruling options inside of Afghanistan. It's like, okay, I know we're not there for oil. That was that rumor was failed because nobody ever did that. And we're not there to win. What are we doing there? There is now no reason to be there. Nobody's even making an argument there's a reason to be there now, other than the fact that, I don't know, you're there right now, right?
Yeah, now it seems to be like you broke it, you bought it. Like,
yeah,
to pull out too fast is to invite more disaster. But there's no, like, what is the mark of success there that would, it's a mess.
Just a mess. And
so many good people have gone over there and come back scarred physically, emotionally, mentally, and so much of the civilian population has been, caught in the middle. And it's just 2 decades of this war. There's
a generation now, generation.
Kids are going over there that weren't alive when the towers fell, and they're fighting in this war.
And kids in Afghanistan are 20 years old, and they were born when U.S. troops came in, and the only thing they've ever known has been that. And now they're gone, and the structures are breaking. But the fact that these Afghan women now are taking to the streets and basically saying, no, Taliban, you're not going to get a free route.
Yeah.
This starts to have harking to the narratives of our own country back in the late 1800s and early 1900s with the suffrage movement.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is we weren't allowing people to be beheaded and having their hands cut off and having them sterilized and having women just beaten and killed in the streets with public support, like happening in Afghanistan. So it's bad. It's really, really bad there. And I don't know what the U.S. is going to do about it, but and it's easy for us to, look at a country like that and turn our minds away and turn our eyes away. But this is going to become a human crisis that's going to require some kind of response from this country of ours.
And that's the thing. The one noble goal, I feel like, of the Afghanistan war was to protect women and children and make it okay for girls to go to school and not be literally murdered for trying to learn to read. And it seems like we've thrown our hands up and said, well, we're not going to be able to get there. And so good luck. But man, these women, I wish they didn't have to do that, but that's inspiring that they're just like, no, we're not going to take this. Yeah. We're going to fight for our right to exist and the rights for our children to exist and go to school.
Yeah. And Jim and Jana in the chat are raising some good points that there was a reactionary response to 9/11 instead of a well thought out response, responding. Well, look, what the Hawks did, and this is, Wolfowitz and now the recently passed Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney and all, the United States has plans all the time for what we would want in every region of the world. So this is what we do as a major superpower. We have an opinion about how everywhere in the world should be. And coming into the 2000s, there were ideas about what we would ideally want in Afghanistan and in Pakistan and Iraq and Iran and even all the way up into Syria. So there was a view of what the United States would want that part of the world to be like. Lots of white papers written about this, lots of predetermined capacities that were put together. And going before 9/11, you could read it. Yeah, I knew about the Wolfowitzes and the Rumsfelds stuff, and I was, nowhere nearly as engaged as I am now. But I knew that the view of the Bush crowd was to think about an interventionist attitude in that part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So there were lots of plans about what they would do, right? Because the United States is formulating its opinions about its view of everywhere in the world. So that was in place. 9/11 happens, and Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld and Paul Wolfowitz, well documented now, have a meeting and say, grab the binder. They literally pulled binders and said, this is the plan we're going to execute. This is what we're going to do in Afghanistan. This is what we're going to do in Iraq. This is our moment to change the game board in this chess match in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and ultimately Kuwait and Iran, even Pakistan. So that's what they did. It, they weren't simply saying, let's put together a single response to this single action. They said, this moment now gives us the opportunity to do this thing we were going to do that we wanted to do otherwise.
Yeah, to hit the start button on this very elaborate plan to reform the Middle East.
Yes, and they had a belief that we all heard them talk about, that we're going to be received as liberators. All of that stuff. They didn't just come up with that on the afternoon of September 11th and then get that all in place by October when they moved into Afghanistan. The reason it could go so fast is because they had been doing contingency planning on this very thing. And it was those contingency plans that were rooted in a bad idea that then were allowed to move forward without the same level of critique that they would have had in any other set of circumstances, because we moved our country onto a war footing. So that's the fatal flaw of the whole thing. And this is why Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld and Cheney will say, no, we don't regret what we did at all. We had to do what we had to do. Because they were still convinced that everything they had in their plan was the right plan. It just didn't go the way they wanted it to go.
Yeah.
And the hubris is they won't even look back and say that the idea was wrong in the first place of what they wanted to do in Afghanistan. Now, having a non-engagement project in Afghanistan was a real problem. Back in 1997 when the Taliban took over and they knocked down those big religious icons. They were taking out anything that didn't meet their Sharia law version of religion. And it was a real problem. What was happening in Afghanistan long before September 11th was really a human crisis. It was really, really a problem. Their solution was the wrong one. And because the United States can't figure out how to do something between a military takeover and invention and destruction project or working with advanced democracies like in NATO, in between there isn't anything. So when we talk about, well, let's go with some sort of a State Department like attitude. Let's use some. They don't know how to do that in Afghanistan and Pakistan and in Kuwait even, or even Saudi Arabia, for crying out loud. Can't figure that out at all. Like, we could sell you weapons, and the only way we know how to lead in that part of the world is with the military and the military complex.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And the fact that in these 20 years, this country of ours has developed zero additional capacity for how to be engaged there. That is, Jim mentions in the chat, we're out. They're going to be out totally. They're now out of that Bagram Air Base, and they just abandoned it. I saw news footage
in the middle of the night. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's hundreds of cars and vehicles left there. They cut the power to the entire base that used to have more than 100,000 people on it. It's like a small town of 100,000 people that the U.S. built there. They abandoned it and cut the power. And the Afghan government doesn't know how to get the power back on because they destroyed the capacity.
What? How is that helpful?
They
Even if you're going to leave in the dead of night and not tell the host nation, like, why not leave them in a position to succeed? Instead, did they leave the keys to all those vehicles? Or are those just scrap metal now? You know what?
Yeah, just mad. I know a lot of people really want to respect our military. So, yes, respect people in the military. But the fact that the military system continues to allow this kind of nonsense to go on, that somehow even this very public retreat from our presence in Afghanistan goes like this, that instead of totally building up and turning all those assets over to the Afghan government so they can oppose the Taliban, they, as Jim Ingle says in his report, basically it looks like the U.S. military looted itself, just tore the thing apart and left.
Yeah. And that's the
Is
frustrating thing I hear from friends in the military is the boots on the ground folks are trying to do the right thing, and then it seems like the higher up bureaucratic side of things is like, nope, we're out, and we're not going to take care of our interpreters that have risked their
oh,
lives, and we're not going to give them visas to come to the U.S., even though they're even more in danger now that we're pulling out. It's a really disappointing way of treating our allies on the ground, for starters, and just, yeah, we should be doing better. Like,
yes.
like
Oh, no,
bare common decency when you're leaving a country. Like,
it's just terrible. I
yeah,
mean, it happened in Iraq. The way that pullout went then caused so much pain in Syria and other places. Uh, it's been a long time since it's gone well. Our
yeah,
use of our military, and again, it remains one of the untouchable parts of our society that certain people don't get to critique.
mm-hmm,
It's just like, no, just thank you for your service. That's all we're ever going to say. Um, and not say, I think there's something fundamentally broken about this whole thing, about how we're using it and utilizing it and doing it. And has been all along.
yeah,
And somebody just says, look, yeah, I do think, countries like ours have to have a military, and we have to do bad things in the world because we've continued to perpetrate a whole world that is rewarded for bad things. But let's not act like our military isn't part of all that. It's a
especially the
part of the
whole industrial complex where we sell weapons to everybody, and
yeah.
then people are using those weapons to shoot at our citizens when we go over there to get involved in the mess.
Yeah, at some point we just really have the agreement, to look hard at all this and say it's not working, because you can do this 20 years, 30 years, 40 years back, right? You can say, oh, what we did in Laos, what we did in Central America, the way that we were involved in destabilizing parts of Africa, the way that we were involved in the early days of the Middle East. Like, you can look at all of those and say, yeah, there's clearly lessons learned. In fact, the military does this all the time. They have whole generals, they have whole levels of people that just do analysis of how we've been involved. Problem, fail, problem, fail, 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 fail. And then we get to now and people are like, no, I think it's probably working pretty good now. No, in 20 years, we're going to look back and say this was a total nutter job.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work. Our
Mm-hmm.
current understanding of utilizing the military in the United States isn't working.
Mm-hmm. And the people that pay the price are the civilians and, our men and women in uniform that don't have the power to make the bigger decisions. They're just stuck
Yes.
in these unwinnable, zero chance for success situations. And it's really horrible that we put good people in those positions.
And I'm hoping that Jesus has this great teaching that I think is true in the human condition, that the spirit is willing and the flesh is weak. In other words, your intentions are one thing, but what you actually do and working out so great. I'm hoping that the spirit of all this is good, and that it's
Mm-hmm.
just the execution that's weak. I begin to wonder, though, that maybe it's the other way around. Maybe our
Mm,
flesh is really strong and deadly, and it's our spirit that's weak,
yeah.
in what's happening. And because the military is the most closed system of all the systems in our society, meaning it's influenced by its own world, its own thinking, and its own people. Right? It is a, by design and by desire, it is a closed system. Right? There's a chain of command and there's a chain of promotion that this all is going to. No one's, other than a president and maybe a secretary of defense. There's no like disruptive forces that come into the military like there is in other industries, right? There's no like great innovation that's really going to disrupt the military world and we're going to end up with a new kind of military. It's going to be run by the people who came into the military 20 and 30 years ago under a certain kind of thinking, and now they're going to be the decision makers, and they're going to listen to people inside that decision making apparatus, and it's going to stay inside the chain of command. It's supposed to be its great strength, and it very well could be its great weakness. That it's just not. There's no other way to get any other view in the military than the people that are in the military. It's supposed to have civilian leadership, and that's supposed to solve some of this problem. But even now, our last two or three defense secretaries, including the current one, they're former military people that got a pass from the Senate to be able to put military people who didn't even sit out the requisite number of years. They rushed it forward. So even the leadership is part of the chain of command. It's really a problem. And it has to be addressed because not because I'm like, I've never served in the military, don't know anything about it, and people should take my words with all that weight, but because it harms the people all over the world who are impacted by the choices of our military.
Yeah.
And you can say all you want about like, well, it's the common people on the ground versus the generals, but you're just talking about generation of this. There was a period of time 30 years ago when all these current brass that are making these decisions were also the people who were on the front lines. So we're just waiting 20 or 30 more years until the people who are influenced by these decisions of today are going to be the decision makers later. It's just.
Yeah. And the only outside civilian influence is usually industries that are making billions of dollars off of selling weapons to the U.S. military, selling aircrafts, warplanes that never work right, and just raking in huge amounts of cash.
Yes.
But they hold huge sway over what sort of things happen in the military. So,
well, there's a lot of news.
Yeah.
It's all linked together. Didn't feel very common goody. A little common good news. Hey, we're going to bike across the country if you want to join us. Here's a quick plug. September 10th through November 14th. You've been hearing about this and thinking about this. Maybe it's time for you to, click on that website, wethepeopleride.org or vocommongood.com, and let us know that you're interested. We'll be in conversations with you. Lots of people are doing it. The time is coming for you to start thinking about joining us somewhere along that ride or with a ride in your own town. So, hey, Dan, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk a little economics on the Common Good Science and Economics Day. So thanks, everybody, for being with us today. And you got anything else?
Nope. We'll see you, everybody.
Okay. See ya. Bye, people.